Now, after years of decline, 2017 has seen a rise in the rate of adoption in Australia. While it is encouraging, much more still needs to be done to ensure children have access to permanent, safe and, importantly, loving homes.
Well, former AFL footballer Brad Murphy spent much of his own childhood in foster care and joins us now in the studio. And from Sydney, we're joined by Renee Carter, the CEO of Adopt Change. Thanks, both of you, very much for joining us this morning. Brad, tell us a bit about your experience of adoption.
Yeah, I suppose I was one of the lucky ones in the sense that I got placed in foster care at 16 months of age and never went anywhere other than with that family. They became my adoptive parents at the age of 18. So I probably had a little bit easier than the 40,000 kids at the moment. They're in and out of home care that just don't know where they're going to end up tonight, basically.
And describe, if you can, the uncertainty you had growing up, not being with your birth parents, not having an adoptive situation until you're 18 or so. What effect does that have on a teenage boy or girl?
Yeah, I think the hardest part for me was not feeling like I belonged to my parents. I knew I wasn't going anywhere, but legally I was still not adopted, and I struggled with that. Little things like school camps and excursions and even playing local footy, the bureaucracy and the paperwork that needed to be filled out just to be able to do those things made it tough for a teenage boy who his friends were doing all that stuff, and a lot of name calling and a lot of bullying at primary school, and I was probably lucky I had a good group of friends that supported me through it, whereas my younger brother probably struggled with it a bit more than I did. So just the not belonging, feeling like you didn't belong, was the hardest thing.
And as you say, many kids have a different experience to you, and potentially an even tougher experience where they're in and out of homes, moving around the country. Yeah,
the numbers are staggering. I think, as I said, 40,000 out of home at the moment in Australia, with only 270 odd adoptions last year. So those numbers just don't add up. Most of these kids are getting passed from family to family to family, and the statistics are showing that a lot of those kids are struggling with addictions and suicides and a lot of that sort of stuff as they get older in life. So
which
it's really
compound with each other, with other factors. Renee, Brad just mentioned those still pretty dispiriting figures there, but a glimmer of hope, I guess. Adoption rates have increased this year. Do we put that down to anything in particular?
Look, I think there's been a positive turn. So there's an understanding that having children in limbo is bad for life outcomes for those children. To move 10 or 20 times during your childhood is just too damaging. So I think that there is really an understanding around Australia that permanency is very important for children, and hopefully this is just the beginning of changing the numbers to reflect what children actually need.
Renee, what are some of the roadblocks that still remain in place for adoption?
Look, for adoption, largely what we've found in our research is that the process is just so overwhelming and complex. It varies from state to state. There's a lot of different policies and processes around adoption, and rightly so. It should be, a very rigorous process to make sure that the adoptive parents are the right parents for the child. But often there's very long delays for no good reason, unexplained loss of paperwork, etc. So really we need to look at streamlining that process.
And Brad, you know people in this area as well, and certainly your adoptive parents. Is that something that rings true with you? Just how hard, sometimes unnecessarily hard, it is for parents to adopt kids?
Yeah, they make it extremely hard. We're a first world country, and making it easy would be a lot more beneficial to the 40,000 children out of home care. Those numbers are just too far apart. But my parents fought tooth and nail to keep me and my two other brothers that were adopted as well. So I'm forever grateful for them that they gave me the opportunity that I have today to live a good life and a really comfortable life, and I owe it all to them, to be honest.
And Renee, should also, as part of this strategy that Adopt Change is working on, should there be more effort placed on keeping children with their birth parents as much as feasibly possible?
Well, look, absolutely. Ideally, children would be with their birth family, and there needs to be a focus on evidence-based early intervention to try and preserve families. But what we need to recognise is when a child has been in out-of-home care because they can't return home, and that's over 2 years, we have almost 40,000 children in that situation. When they're not likely to return home, then permanency for them in another situation is quite key. So whether that's with relatives or another family that they've been living with through foster care, that permanency is really critical for them.
Renee, does it look like things could change in Australia anytime soon?
Look, I think we're seeing positive change, particularly in New South Wales. A number of children that were adopted from foster care went up from last year from 68 in New South Wales to 129. So that's quite a big increase, and that was a very deliberate effort to look at not having children in long-term foster care. They're either returned home to their family if they can, and if not, in guardianship or an adoptive home. So I think we really need to see this around Australia, and there are signs that that permanency is becoming more of a focus nationally.
Okay, Renee, Brad, just before we go, Brad, the last words to you. What advice would you have to childless parents, considering whether they should become foster care parents or adoptive parents? Not quite sure. What advice would you have for them?
I think for me, everyone deserves to be a parent. Everyone deserves to have a family, and some people don't have that ability, whether it's through natural reasons or you know, even the yes vote that's just happened now. I think a lot more families should be getting into foster care and even adoption. So I would encourage anyone that's thinking about it to get involved. You know, the 40,000 kids out of home, there's not that many foster families, so there's just a real need for some people to get on board and help out in this space.
Brad, Renee, let's hope we can get those numbers ticking up. Thank you both very much for joining us on Breakfast this morning.
Thank you.